and emerging. Thank you, Jane. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm Dr. Melissa Innes. I work in the School of Business and Creative Industries with my wonderful, helpful colleague, Jane Menzies, and we take great pride in putting together these sessions, which bring together the 4556 Chamber and all our wonderful industry visitors around the Sunshine Coast region, obviously our industry experts that can share their knowledge with us, and our postgraduate students, and we even have some undergraduate students in the room today, which is very exciting. So welcome everybody to this event, and we hope that you gain a lot of knowledge from today that you can share with others as well. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Jackie LaRue today from the Chamber, and Jackie has a few words to share with you as well. So enjoy the morning, and I'll see you all later. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's so great to be here, and I represent the fantastic Chamber of Commerce, the 4556 Chamber of Commerce. And look, our whole desire as a chamber is to really champion business owners and leaders in the community. So we are very privileged to collaborate with the University of Sunshine Coast, and Jane and Melissa and the team do an amazing job. And we also partner with the Institute of Managers and Leaders. So really grateful. We couldn't do, we're better together when we collaborate. And when we planned this year the events and the topics, we wanted to give you the cutting edge in business. And I do believe that prevention is better than cure, right? It's like going to the doctor or your health professional. And today's topic with our experts is all about prevention, because we don't want to have a sick business. We can't sustain if we don't put into practice some of these things. So so really looking forward to hearing from our experts today. So thank you so much for taking the time. We really do appreciate it. And hopefully we can take the value from today and implement it. That's the goal of today. Just as I wrap up, I just wanted to share a couple of events for those of you who are not aware. As a chamber, we offer free membership. So if you jump onto the QR code, you'll be able to sign up for free, or you might know somebody. We service the whole postcode of 4556. So that's why we collaborate with the university. So there's a couple of events that we'd like to offer our members as well. They're free events. We run a coffee morning of the first Tuesday of every month. Our next one is at the IGA in Sippy Downs. They are one of our sponsors. It's the first Tuesday of the month. So follow our socials and you won't miss anything. Well, we've also started a brand new event, which is called the Late Shift. Is that right? It's called that. And that is for an evening, because a lot of people do the school drop off on a morning and they can't make the evening. So that is coming up on the last Thursday of the month, the 27th of March. And that will be hosted by at the Vine at the Bower Tree venue. So we do invite you to come along. It's 5:30 to 7:30. Come along, come and do some networking. We really want to add value to you. And, that is how we grow our businesses, but also to look after ourselves. So thanks so much for coming today, and hope you get a lot of value today out of our session. Thanks.
Do I get to drive? All right, this is me. I've been really fortunate to have a very different career in cyber, mostly operational. A little bit different than the traditional cyber and what most people think of as cyber. I'm very fortunate to be here now at the university. And so I'd like to really thank everyone for attending. This is a really important topic. It's critical, especially for small to medium businesses, to figure out and navigate the cybersecurity challenges that they face. I want to thank Jane and Melissa specifically for organizing this and extending such a kind invitation, and Scott, Victoria, and Brighton, about whom you will hear a little bit more in a bit. So we live in interesting times. Anybody ever hear that phrase? May you live in interesting times. Originally, it was attributed to being a Chinese curse. And whether or not this apocryphal phrase was actually a curse or not, we find ourselves currently living in interesting times. Consider what's happening now. Political hacktivism, or cyber warfare, if you listen to certain people, distributed denial of service attack, taking down Twitter. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is being dismantled through budget and staff cuts. Its red team effort eliminated. This has weakened the US's ability to defend its critical infrastructure. U.S. Cyber Command, with whom I've worked in the past, has been told to cease all offensive operations against Russia, in spite of increased espionage and cyber operations by Russian hackers and Russian nation-state actors. Anybody follow the news that recently? Anybody know who Dread Pirate Roberts is? Ross Ulbricht was given a life sentence for running Silk Road, running the first darknet marketplace, and hiring a hitman, and laundering money, and selling drugs. Was released from prison, paroled. Co-founder of Pirate Bay recently passed away. And that's just on the geopolitical front. That's not even on the technical side. So we talk about, how many of you have TP-Link routers that you're running? Yeah, they're susceptible to a botnet. I own an Archer, or I have pulled it offline. Oops. Zoom client, vulnerable to attack. Fortinet client application, vulnerable to attack. How about a potential Python vulnerability? Anybody work with Python script? We teach Python here at the university as a scripting language. Potential vulnerability. I happen to follow the DPRK, North Korea. The largest cryptocurrency heist in history at $1.5 billion. Why? Well, they were using freeware storage, for one. Apparently didn't check the vulnerability, even though they were warned. Also social engineering, at which they are very, very astute. Meanwhile, the US has announced a cryptocurrency strategic reserve using all of the confiscated 200,000 tokens in Bitcoin to create the strategic reserve. Think that's going to impact the global economy at all? And of course, we see the increased use of artificial intelligence, not only to provide support to us, to write code to help support and defend networks and systems, and to identify cyber threats and respond to cyber threats in some of the firewall systems that have integrated it. But now hackers are using and selling AI written code on darknet marketplaces that can target many of our systems. You don't even have to be a genius coder anymore to be able to write malware and sell it on the darknet. That is a sea change. That's huge. Now, I moved to Australia in 2017. Safe, removed from everybody, isolated, not a problem. Well, unfortunately, cyber reaches everywhere. We do, as Australians, feel somewhat insulated from most of the global threats, and we like to think of ourselves as distant from these geopolitical flashpoints, which, as we're seeing, is not necessarily true. As a matter of fact, there is no aspect of our lives that are not directly impacted by cyber and cybersecurity. It's no longer just a niche concern. It's a national security issue. It's a business continuity issue and a personal privacy issue. Every small and medium business that relies on telecommunications, digital finance, supply chains, transport, energy use, and even customer relations is potentially vulnerable to a cyber attack. The challenge, how do you as business owners find a right balance between improving and maintaining your cybersecurity, but also not creating a barrier to your expansion and development and business operations? How does the government balance regulatory impacts and policy impacts on businesses without preventing their growth and success, but still maintain a secure environment? Most large corporations, Lockheed, Boeing, the big boys, they can afford dedicated full-time cybersecurity staff. They can afford cutting edge technologies and different kinds of mechanisms to improve their cybersecurity, protect their digital assets. But what about small and medium businesses? who often lack the funding, they lack the personnel, or even the basic awareness to maintain a cybersecurity posture in their organizations and protect themselves from attack and exploitation. How do small and medium businesses secure their operations while still remaining agile and competitive? And how do they navigate an increasingly hostile digital environment with limited resources? Many businesses have suffered during COVID, they've suffered during bushfires, they've suffered during floods, and they're barely making it. How do they then dedicate necessary resources to secure their systems? Now, I'm not saying we're going to answer all these questions today, but I am saying that these are the questions you need to ask ourselves. Keep in the back of your mind as you listen to our speakers talk about cybersecurity. We are indeed living in interesting times, and we will continue, as far as I can tell, for the next several years. So let's get started. All right, what I'd like to do is have each of the speakers introduce themselves. Like to start? While I pull up the menu of items.
Well, I'm Scott Betteridge. My background a very long time ago, I became an avionics engineer in the Air Force for 20 years. And then decided that my future career was in finance, and that's been going for 22 years or so. I'm a financial advisor and a stockbroker. So although I'm not academically credentialed to talk about cybersecurity, I am reasonably well read, even from just a perspective investment profile of the sorts of things that we've just spoken about or listened to. My journey has been one of compliance and one of mandatory compliance through ASIC's obligations, or my obligations to ASIC and my clients. I guess not everyone has that mandated obligation. So people in the room here go, well, that's nice, you have to do it, Scott. So the issue is I had to change my attitude a fair bit, because I consider myself small business. And really, ASIC considers me as if I am ANZ or Commonwealth Bank, or they don't see me any differently. I hold the same critical elements that Commonwealth Bank does. So I had to change my attitude to think more corporate. The government's got a very good regime in the Essential 8 program. And that is worth reading, because that was my starting point, because that's my obligation. So that process took me through a fair bit of understanding. That helped me change my attitude. I mean, I understood things that we've just discussed globally, my global awareness, and I'm well read on all the things AI. But getting over the idea that hacking is some kid on a keyboard board in university holidays is not really the profile that I've taken. Yeah, because we used to think we were not a big target, but we are. For this lecture today, Leanne Mayfield asked me to potentially post on LinkedIn the event, because I got 500 or 600 friends on LinkedIn. Interestingly, I've just had my fourth cybersecurity audit, and this week the 3 breaches I had was through LinkedIn. So I didn't post on LinkedIn as I was asked to by Leanne, because my 3 breaches. We are what's called maturity level 1. We started out being 0, and we're maturity level 1. We're moving towards maturity level 3, up to 3 is the ultimate for us, potentially, and we're moving towards 2. So I've got to show a level of improvement and maturity in my systems, my processes, my awareness, a whole heap of things. and it just goes forever and ever and ever. But it's very prescriptive and it's very useful because the professionals that I now have to use, it's not a choice for me, use those mandates to test, where my business is. But as the business owner, it's all about my attitude. Interestingly, initially I had a fair bit of reluctance because now I have to MFA about 40 million times a day. And that's difficult when you're busy. And so as a business owner, I've got a million excuses as to why I shouldn't adhere to the same things that my staff do, because I'm busier. I've got excuses, but it's not, it can't be the case. And if you might start out that way, but you've got to keep refining your adherence to this. Cybersecurity is a large mandate and you can approach it in a whole range of different ways, but the essential eight is a useful starting point. The attitude really matters because it just that the AI and the dark web allows small targets like myself and your businesses to be attractively accessed. And we've got to try and prevent that, lower our footprint, lower our risk. And we've got to lower our risk at a client level. Interestingly, to help me get over the attitude problem I had initially, I started explaining to clients the steps I was taking in my reviews. When I'm reviewing my clients, I was sitting down with them for an hour and a half, and I started making cybersecurity a topic. It actually worked in my favour. In fact, clients became really interested in the fact that I was bothering to care about that. Some of my processes are slower than they used to be, and the client acceptance has been one of advocacy, not annoyance. I was surprised. I thought they'd be annoyed. They actually became advocates. Last Thursday, I had a very large new client, many millions. And that client, for the very first time in my 22 years of being an advisor, turned to me and said, "So now can you explain to me your cybersecurity policies?" First time anyone's ever asked me that, but I think it's going to be more predominant in the future. And luckily, I said, "Well, actually," and he was as interested as I was, but I do understand that's a small percentage of the population. So the things I'm saying, the things the others here will say, don't really excite everyone. But I think if my first clients asked me to explain my cybersecurity policy, it's challenging in my, because I use some, hit words like information stack. I have all these platforms I use, and they all have their cybersecurity policy. When I've gone to ask them about that, there is only so much they will tell you. And there's good reasons for that. In the military, we call it the need to know. So they don't want to promote what the response is going to be. In my situation, I have to have cybersecurity insurance. I lose control the moment I have an event. Someone's going to take control off me, and there's only so much I'll be allowed to know. And that's a bit disconcerting, and other people here will have a view of that. I've never had to do that response yet, but it's still many unknowns that I have about what would happen if I had an event.
Thank you very much. Victoria, please introduce yourself, and can you also provide a little insight into what you consider to be cybersecurity and the critical importance of being cyber savvy for a business owner?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm sure, like a lot of people in the room, I've never done any actual formal tech training. I have ended up at L Digital purely because of the fact that when I finished university, everyone was like, "Yeah, go get a job." And I was like, "Yep, cool." This is about 10 years ago now, and I ended up in sales in tech. And so I realized I've had a lot to learn to start off with. About 5 years ago, I started really specializing in cybersecurity. And a big reason for that is because of the fact that I recognise that, well, my mum's a small business owner, so is both my aunts, my grandfather was, and actually my father is as well. And there's a lot of people around me who own their own small businesses, and I realised that most people have no freaking clue what on earth they should be doing tech-wise, let alone cybersecurity-wise. So I do very much focus on corporate level side of things, but my absolute passion lies within enabling and helping small businesses. And the main reason for that is my role pretty much from 2020 through to 2023 was cyber education. And that was a massive eye-opener for me because of the fact that when you start looking at businesses in general, the corporates have it, they have their policies, they've got their people, they've got training, they know what they've got to do, they've got people within the business who go and talk to government and they get told everything they've got to do and they go, all right, well, we can spend $50,000 on this, we can spend $10,000 on that. When you start looking at businesses that sort of have no more than 300 staff, let alone businesses that have less than 50 staff, you're talking a very, very different language because number one, no one here has ever done a tech course, let alone, I'm guessing that most people in this room actually never learned technology at school. I know I didn't really pay any attention to tech at school.
You're not helping us out here.
All right. So how on earth do you actually look at going, all right, well, I've got to run a business. I've got to do these things in my life. Where on earth do I even start? Because who's going to teach me this stuff? So over the years, I've well and truly realised that there is a massive need for this. I can point you guys on a number of different resources. There's a fantastic guy based in Brisbane, Craig Ford. He's got a website called Cyber Unicorns. He actually has training that's like $20 a month that you can actually go in. He's designed it so that small business owners, is actually designed for like older people, brilliant individual. But there's certain things that you only ever learn when you're actually in the industry. So for me, my history has been very much in that sales side of things, but obviously a massive element of sales is you get to talk to obviously the people who want to buy your product, but at the same time, you also have to talk to the people who don't want to buy your product and understand that mentality of those who don't. You go, okay, where would you actually start in changing that mind shift? So that's definitely a massive element for me. The other side of things as well is that having been in the industry now for about 5 years, specifically cybersecurity, is that it's not a if mentality for a business anymore, it's a when. I have had terrifying conversations of recruiters who have a 10-person organisation who've been hit by a cyber attack and they go, well, crap, I've realised that every single resume that's ever been handed to me, some of these people who put their photos, phone addresses, dates of birth, etc., are now publicly available information and they say it's my fault. There are farms out there who are being hit by nation-state actors. Yeah, don't ask me why, but I'm talking like 8 farmers. Yeah. But these businesses, like, it's no longer a mentality of going, all right, well, I'm just a 2 or 3 person organisation in the Sunshine Coast or Southeast Queensland. Surely I won't ever be a target. Unfortunately, yeah. And the worst part is that the government and is really starting to crack down on. They go, well, tough luck. You're a small business owner. Well, you're a business owner. We don't care if you're a small business owner, but we're going to hold you liable for anything that you're no longer doing, which I think is the most terrifying thing of all. So,
Thank you. Right, please tell us about yourself and also tell us what you think of when you're talking about cybersecurity and critical importance of being cybersecurity.
Yeah, so I'm Brian Mitchell. I run a cybersecurity company here called Digitech. So I come from, I'm probably very lucky because my father is in IT as well. So I sort of grew up in the IT industry throughout the entire 90s, being a child, building PCs, doing that, sort of the hardware side. And then went into university, became a teacher, stepped back into technology, and I've sort of gone down that formal education of all my industry certifications. I'm also a developer, so I do a fair bit of coding as well. So I have a very deep understanding, I guess, of the technical aspect And one of the things that I guess why we started Mintitech was I got very sick of seeing a lot of IT companies out there saying, pay us this and we'll fix your cybersecurity problems. And so I guess the challenges I see out in the industry is there's a lot of marketing, which is very much a buy our product, you're safe to be secure. When in reality, you've really got to look at your policies, your people, and your processes, not just the technology stack. And that's kind of where I see a lot of IT pros fall over in a lot of IT companies. They don't understand that policy, they don't understand that process. They understand the technology and what they've been told about the technology, and then that's kind of what they push into small businesses. And unfortunately, it leaves a lot of gaps. When we talk the essential 8, the key word there is the essential. That should be the bare minimum you're aiming for. There's a lot more you can do on top of that, but the government had to start a framework somewhere that small businesses could adopt and could pick up and not be overburdened. We do a fair bit of work up in the ISO world, so ISO 27001, and also what used to a little bit of work in the IRAP, which is more the high end, what the military was pushing onto their contractors. So we sort of go from a spectrum of small business all the way to dealing with a couple of thousand controls that you have to implement as a business and working through those. So I've sort of seen a fair bit across the spectrum. And then more importantly is I'm the person who then has to go and implement that as well. So I'm not just an auditor going, hey, have you done this? It's like, hey, cool, we need to do this. This is the technical solution we have to put in place to actually make that happen. And these are the potential impacts on the business.
Cool. All right. Victoria, you get the first question. What is best to start with? People, process, or policy?
Well, I think this one's an interesting one, and the main reason being is because I think it well and truly depends on your business. So Scott over here, obviously in finance, process is probably and policy is probably where you really need to start, because that's going to dictate what you need to do. For a small business that doesn't have a framework in place that you have to adhere to, my mentality is always going to start with your people. They're going to be the thing that will inevitably take your business down if something's going to happen. They're going to be the ones who will click on a phishing link, accidentally install something that they shouldn't, and they'll be the ones to, I think depends on which report you look at. Anywhere between the 95 to 99% of data breaches start with a human doing something silly. Now, cybersecurity training, it doesn't mean that they need to be sitting there doing horrible hours upon hours of courses. There's some really, really good training out there. I mentioned Craig with Cyber Unicorns before. The ACSC has some fantastic resources that are available on their government website, so cyber.gov.au. If you go through there, they've actually got small business resources up there as well. There is things like Cybersecurity Month in October. There are numerous privacy days and weeks, and if you start having a look at the calendar, there's pretty much something that comes up every couple of weeks. So I think definitely starting with your people. If you are looking at a framework of sorts, I know that Essential 8 has been mentioned numerous times. If you do look through the paperwork, you'll see Airlock actually mentioned in the Essential 8. So from what I do as part of my role is Airlock is application control. So what that means is from a technology perspective, nothing can actually be installed on a computer that you don't allow in the first place. It doesn't have to be a hard process. And a lot of the Essential 8 doesn't have to actually be a difficult process. So if you've got someone who's telling you, oh, this is going to be a massive project of work for you, it doesn't really have to be. They're just the basic controls that you need to do to keep your business at the basic level secure. There's a lot of other things that you can go and do. If you go and research cybersecurity companies, there's a lot of different audits that can be done. They don't need to be huge. You could probably start off with a small business of anywhere between sort of under $5,000 will get you a decent audit, I reckon, these days. And then on the back of that, it doesn't need to be a hugely expensive project. One of the most terrifying things I've actually ever heard in my career is I was chatting to a gent who was saying that he was trying to encourage his mates to essentially invest in cybersecurity. And mate was, I think, a real estate agent, and he turned around and goes, look, what you're asking of me is to put an investment into my business that when I look at that type of money, you're asking me to choose between my family holiday or this investment. Yeah, we know as small business owners, that's the choice that we're asking you to make. However, the consequences of not making that decision are going to be catastrophic as things come into place. So the federal government's been looking at updating the Privacy Act. Has anyone come across those changes? Any hands yet? Yeah. The changes to the Privacy Act will mean that if you hold private information and if you accidentally have a data breach, you could be held quite heavily liable to the extent where it will bankrupt you. And I don't say that in the way to terrify people, but it's the reality. It will bankrupt small businesses if they don't have the correct cybersecurity measures in place. If anyone follows ASIC and Big Securities at the moment, like the directors of Big Securities are being held seriously liable because of the basic controls that they didn't implement. They had a policy in place. And I was actually reading through the last little bit that got made public the other day, but this morning. But they had the policy, they hadn't implemented the policy, and now they're being held liable for it. So your people are definitely going to be a major element. The investment is going to be a major element. And then the technologies, look, as mentioned before, the marketing skill of a lot of technologies looks good. There's a lot of companies out there who say, yeah, invest in us and you'll never get breached. There's no such thing as a never get breached. There is no such thing as anyone ever being able to promise you that you'll ever be 100% safe, because no one can promise that. Threat actors are becoming more and more savvy in what they're doing. You know, AI is definitely helping a lot there. So crafting very specific messaging, etc. But you need to start doing the absolute basics in order to protect your business. Once you've got those basics in place, then you can start sort of looking at building on top of that. Yeah, it's going to mean that you guys are going to have to do a bit of learning. It's not a fun piece of learning sometimes, and you're going to end up very, very confused. There are YouTube videos that can help, trust me. But definitely start with those basics, work your way up. There's a lot of resources out there. I mentioned the cyber security government ones. There's a lot of resources, so feel free if you ever need to. Always happy to have anyone ping me as well on the back of that, and happy to share those resources around.
Awesome, thank you, Victoria. Scott, next one's for you. As a financial advisor, it's clear you have a lot of knowledge and motivation to meet specific cybersecurity clients. Is there a way for small businesses to gain this know-how, this knowledge, to be able to implement cybersecurity that's relevant to their businesses?
Yeah, man, I think well, the people who are here today are step one. It just lifting your level of awareness, understanding the gap. The simple way for me to understand it is understand the risk of doing nothing. And that can be a scary experience because doing nothing would have those bankruptcy consequences. It definitely is an agenda that the government is pursuing and the insurance companies are pursuing it. Fundamentally, my compliance gives me the opportunity to defend myself against those claims. I've got to prove best effort. There was I won't name them, a national brand financial planning firm a couple of years ago got fined $700,000 from ASIC because they simply didn't have the highest quality software they could have. So they adhered to the policy in general, but they took the cheaper version of this and the cheaper version of that. So back to the expense. Last year was a fairly large implementation year for me, and I probably spent an order of $80,000. I've got 5 staff. My relatively new photocopier was not encrypted protection. So I got a new photocopier because the scan mode, which I use mostly, has data on it. I bought new laptops with a camera and a fingerprint. We wrote the policy, it's not required of us, but we wrote the policy where at the end of every day, the laptop's got to be removed and put in a safe and off the grid, no power. Just to, there's an idea of in the moat, outside the moat, less entry points in your business. So I guess from that perspective, the risk of doing nothing was pretty profound because I previously didn't have continuous monitoring. I now pay for that. All my staff do training. We now pay for that. We do 2 audits a year. We now pay for that. So there's a lot of pay moments. But I've got colleagues in my industry and in the accounting industry that are yet to even have this conversation. They're not even at this briefing today. So the risk of them not being here and the risk of them not being able to have this conversation is significant, not just for them, but for their clients. And I guess that'll be the test. I hopefully never have to prove I've done the right thing. So it's like a lot of deterrence. Hopefully you never have to use it or prove that you've done the right thing, because I don't really want an egregious attack on any of my clients.
That's pretty brilliant. And actually, you bring up a really good point. How many business owners here, when they retire their old computers, faxes, or copiers, degauss their drives or destroy them, shred them, have them all chopped up, and many? Yeah, one of our favorite things was seeing people what are called dumpster diving, going into large bins and retrieving hard drives for exploitation purposes. They can forensically recover all of the data off of copiers, including nation states would go to government sales specifically to buy faxes, copiers, and hard drives where the data was not removed or the drives were not destroyed. It is a major industry for intelligence collection effort.
So absolutely, that is brilliant point. Thank you for bringing that up. Right. Third question's for you. Can we solve all of our cybersecurity problems with technology, or are there other things that we all should consider?
So I think the answer to that is definitely no. Technology isn't the golden bullet to solve cybersecurity. It is really that combination of good technology, good training for people, and good process. Right? We're seeing kind of a nexus point now. And if you've ever worked for a non-for-profit, you would have had a fair bit of compliance and governance around how you manage the money, how you report that. You would normally have things like quality systems to track. We're kind of now seeing, I guess, the amalgamation of those compliance, quality, and cyber all sort of coming into one field where they have to work together now to actually provide a holistic solution for businesses from a protection point of view. Now, the challenge with cybersecurity, I guess, as a whole is it's a risk mitigation strategy. You can never achieve 100%. And this is the challenge I think every business looks at is they go, well, I can never solve it, so why should I invest in it? And that's kind of why, I guess, from a policy point of view, the government has had to start to put in these sort of mechanisms to go, well, if you don't, these are now the outcomes. The challenge, I think, for a lot of small businesses is where to start. And my advice there is first you need to understand kind of your risk areas from a cyber point of view, and then just start with the one that is the highest risk to your business. Cybersecurity is a journey. Don't just think you can put a year into it and be done. It's a continuous improvement process. And as technology and new attack vectors and new ways come up, you need to be pivoting and changing and switching up on those sort of global things, because we talk about, you hear a lot of term, the hackers and all that, and that's really your activist type motion. Yeah, cybercrime is a big business. And you sort of got these hacktivists, you've got the cyber crime business syndicates, and then you've got nation state. Nation state, they're probably going to go after primary industries, things like that. They have more geopolitical plays. But the cyber crime people, they're just there to make money. Whatever business they can get in, they will get in and hold that ransom and push that forward. And that's where that training piece comes in. I see, there's sort of been a bit of an epidemic of what we call business email compromises, where somebody hacks somebody's email, they see an invoice, they modify the bank details in the invoice, it's full legit, sent across, someone pays the money to the wrong account. the way we get around that is what is the process we can put in place there? Instead of relying on technology to potentially stop that, what's a human process we can put in? Okay, can we ring the people and go, hey, can you confirm for me your bank details? Because they look different from either the ones I have on record, or I just want to verify that I'm sending money to the right place. So that's kind of where, you know, basic process can actually reduce the risk dramatically. And you're not having to rely on technology, because sometimes it's not your cyber security that's the problem. Sometimes it's your customers or your suppliers that's the problem. So you might be doing everything well, but you get screwed over because they haven't done anything well, and they go to pay you an invoice or something, and next minute the money never arrives. Now, interestingly, over in WA, I think they just trial was finished, and I think it was about 2 weeks ago. They actually made the supplier who mispaid another company liable for that. So not only did that supplier, I think it was close to 600,000-700,000. Not only did they miss that money, they only managed to recover about 200K back. They then had to repay that to the actual customer. Beforehand, it was very well, hey, we paid, here's the evidence, bad luck type of ethos. But now that precedent has been set, that's going to be interesting as that sort of comes around Australia as all the legal cases pop up for that. Because it only takes one legal precedence for that sort of flow through a whole lot of other businesses. So the thing I say is look at your technology, but a good policy, a good process, and good training for people is critical for this. It's the combination of those three things working together that's going to help improve your business, while potentially reducing the cost, right, of delivery of cybersecurity, because you can spend a lot of money on technology, and ultimately if somebody opens or clicks a link, all that money is pretty much at that point in time useless.
Anybody here in the real estate field? Cool. We just went through this process, and it's one thing to teach cybersecurity to students, and it's another thing to live it. We just bought a house. Imagine moving money from one country to another, putting in deposits, and paying a large amount of money to a bank account, hoping there was no man-in-the-middle attack. There was no spoof, that the accounts were credible and legitimate, that the emails were encrypted. Yeah, it was a real educational experience to go through that process and see this level of cybersecurity and this level of cybersecurity for these different organizations with whom we've been dealing. And it was a real educational process for me. And I can't imagine what it's like for the average person with no training experience with background in cyber.
I just wanted to add something here as well. So obviously I'm in sales. I can count on one hand the number of times I have been called to ask to verify bank account details. I sold a hell of a lot more deals than just 5, I can tell you that. It'd be up in the hundreds. But the businesses that have actually called to say, hey, can I just verify? Because I know that you're a trusted person. You're the one who I've been speaking to throughout the whole process. I've received an email from a different email from your organization. Can I just confirm? It has blown me away every single time because there's not enough people who do it. On that note as well, one of the most terrifying phone calls I've had to make in my life was I worked in a small cybersecurity company that we used to capture phishing emails. And for some reason, this company used to get targeted very, very often with phishing emails. And my CTO was ex-police, and every now and then he'd just forward me through an email and say, hey, this is a small business. Can you go just let them know that their emails are obviously been hacked and that they're now sending out phishing emails? So this lady I called was a psychologist. She was based over in Perth. I called her probably about 10 a.m. on a midweek morning. She turns around and goes, look, it's school holidays. What do I do? And I said to her, I'm like, look, just at the very least, take your computer down to your local computer shop. Your emails have actually been hacked. I can't help you from where I am right now, but I needed to let you know because your email address is now being used to send false referrals through to doctors' offices. It's being used to send false information through to a random number of different companies. but it's your legitimate email address. And that's also another element of a business email compromise is that her email address, and she goes, oh, I just thought that my Microsoft was down for a few days. And the terrifying thing is that the payloads that were actually within the email, so the emails that were being sent out from her email were containing a PDF. That if someone clicked on that PDF, that then infected their machine, and they would then have their emails hacked on the back of that. So it's a continuous process which literally, well, we didn't know where it actually started, but hoping that at least letting someone know. So if you ever do get a phone call along those lines, act on it immediately, because that type of information is critical to at least stopping that process from occurring. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be your brand as well that ends up being detrimented. It's going to be your business that ends up being detrimented, and it's going to protect a lot of other people in the scheme of things too. So
Thank you, thank you. Oh,
Just quickly, email has been the biggest cultural change we've had to adopt. I don't know how long email has been around, 45 years to 50 years, whatever it is now, it's quite a while. That culture has been embedded in small business for quite a while. The types of things we will allow on an email, the language we'll use, the information we give away is changing. One of my major platforms has done an agreement with Microsoft, so that hopefully we'll have a dedicated encrypted Teams communication process via Microsoft to clients. That should happen next year, and we should probably, hopefully, avoid all email. Have a very limited email footprint. It is just playing with the gods to continue to use email as a business medium.
I'd probably counter that and just go, yeah, email is a form of communication, and there are multiple channels of communication we have in a business. The thing I see in IT grow a lot in the field is poor deployments of emails. So all the correct security settings are not configured, everything's left open. There are encrypted emails. It's a very easy thing to do and turn on and enable. It's just no one ever does it properly. And that's maybe an educational piece. It could be the fact that maybe IT industry as a whole isn't regulated. So people who get into IT, don't have formal education, they don't have training, like they learn it on the job, which is fine, but it does mean some of these more, I guess, technically correct things that the corporates do very well aren't always done to the SMBs to the level they should be. And technology has, a lot of the service providers have come a long way with these features for SMBs, but I still see the adoption of them being used in small businesses being in very low percentages. For an example, you can set up a mail rule. So if you put encryption in the subject header of a Microsoft 365 email, it will automatically encrypt it. You can set up a whole lot of policy and tagging. We can say this is a sensitive email, therefore it uses the encrypted email settings, which means it doesn't actually, the email never actually leaves the server, but what it does, it sends a link to the person to log into that email server with their authenticated credentials, where they can then view that email. So there is the technology out there, and I think just dropping a tool because we think it's unsecure probably isn't always the answer. We need to understand why it's unsecure, and there are use cases why we should be using emails, and there's use cases where potentially you shouldn't be using emails. And I think it's understanding that, and again, it comes back to risk. Understanding what the risk is. As somebody in finance, we're in a regulated industry. You understand risk very well, and you probably have a very higher tolerance of risk. Where you're like, hey, if it's this, there's no way I'm doing it. But a lot of our other small businesses, we don't need that degree of risk. It's understanding where we should use the right tool.
All right, I'm going off script.
Great discussion. Microsoft has integrated Copilot. We're seeing the integration of AI tools throughout. It's easier, right? It saves us work time, maybe an employee or two. Write our emails for us, write our sales pitches, LinkedIn posts, articles. AI is doing everything for us. Is that gonna help or hurt?
My concern with that comment is, I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. Obviously, it's efficient and you need the scale and efficiency. The other consideration is that it's learning nearest neighbour approach to learning what we all say, do, and activate with our technology. So there are ways to limit that, and you need to have experts manage your AI like any other medium. And yeah, we have higher tolerances than you might need to in a less compliant environment. But fundamentally, it knows a lot about you.
So I think from my point of view, I like to look at AI and going, all right, well, what are you actually putting into it? So I have heard some very interesting AI stories over the years. One of them, a rather large not-for-profit based in Brizzy, actually had someone turn around and go, oh yeah, I've managed to use AI to get around some of the paywalls for Courier Mail, and this not-for-profit turnaround was like the CIO. Sorry, we're a religious organisation. You can't be saying that you have something like that around here. That is completely and utterly unethical. Be wary of what you're putting into these models. So AI trains itself based on what we put into it. If we're putting sensitive information into it, it's going to train it based on that sensitive information. And sensitive information can contain anything from someone's first name, last name, their email address, their phone number, dates of birth. Anything that can be used to personally identify somebody is considered sensitive information. And so you put that into an AI model and it's going to start to remember that stuff. And God forbid, imagine if they managed to turn around and go, oh, okay, because this organisation put in all this type of stuff. Now, there are AI models out there that can work on sort of levels that are excluded from general internet. And yes, some businesses may choose to use some of those things. I do expect that eventually they will become a bit more of a norm for businesses. They're not there yet. And if anyone tries to tell you something along those lines, it's going to be upwards of $100 to hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to try and configure it properly. So don't trust anyone if they say, yeah, this AI tool is going to keep your personal information safe, because it won't as yet. I think using Copilot is making an understanding as to what you do turn on within your organization. Honestly, if I was in finance, if I was in any of those regulated type industries, healthcare, there's no chance in hell like Copilot to it done.
I think so when we talk about AI, right, AI is a very, very large field. To give you an idea, when computing started, AI was a part of that process at the very start. We're talking turning machines, we're talking 40s, 50s. So when we're talking AI here, what we're probably talking about is your GPT models, which is your large language models. Now, you put that they are an algorithm, they are a contextual algorithm, which means the data you put in is the data you get out based on the questioning you ask it. It is a very effective tool, but it is just a tool. And the way we choose to use that tool is up to us as humans. And all technology is a form of a tool, right? So it can be used in a bad way, it can be used in a good way. How we choose to use that is up to us. Now, there are going to be people who will use it in the wrong way. How do we defend against that? We're still coming up with ways how to approach that. But for your business, the biggest thing about, I guess, artificial intelligence in terms of these GTP models is how we do the data, how we label our data, how we exclude certain data from being ingested by those models is key. So for an example, with Copilot from Microsoft, there's actually nearly a 200-page deployment guide that should be done before you even turn Copilot on. And that is something called labeling all your data and saying, these are all your data, these are the permission schemas, and based upon whoever's using that AI, he will only gain access to the data they should be able to see. Now, Copilot is a form of GPT called RAG AI. And what that means is that you ask it a question, it uses a search, it looks at all the data, it goes, what's the most closest thing to the phrases I'm searching for, returns that data back to you. It is really just a fancy version of Google that can then be contextually aware. So it's not something we should be scared about, right? We need to understand it, because once we understand it, we can go, okay, that makes sense. Now I know what I need to do to protect myself from it. And I see a lot of the industries, we spin out the word AI everywhere. There are some really, really good uses of AI. Machine learning, which has been around forever, is amazing. Monitoring fridges, freezers, predictive maintenance, all that stuff is an artificial intelligence algorithm, right? But it's a very small vertical. What we're seeing now is a very common, I guess, is the common adoption of these GPT models, and they're sort of trending and trying to bring all these different schools of AI into one ultimate sort of AI model in the long run. And that's, I think, what they're calling is the agentive AI from memory. That's kind of where they're going to get to. So we'll have a very highly smart agent type approach, but it is just a tool. And I think the biggest thing we should all be doing as business owners is understanding those tools, because that's going to allow us to go, is this, again, we then do a risk analysis and go, is this something that I should be using? Is the risk low enough that I as a business owner go, yes, I accept that, and I'm willing to back myself in that scenario if something does happen.
On the back of that too, just as small business owners, the state government has stood up what they call Queensland AI Hub. It's based out of Fortitude Valley, but they are also a fantastic resource if you wanted to look into that too.
So I'm just curious, how many graduate and postgraduate students here? Do you use AI? How many use AI? All right, how many business folks use AI? And I will tell you, as an instructor, as a lecturer, it's almost an arms race for us. Because we also have to worry about plagiarism, and we have to worry about copy pasting of AI generated content into our assignments. And so we look at creative ways to integrate AI to support the student, to make them successful, but not make it do all the work for them. So they're still going through the thinking process, analysis, critical thinking requirement.
So it's a bit of a challenge for us, that you're absolutely right. I use it at home just to identify the species of gecko running down the wall. I take a picture and, what is that? So, kind of handy. So, all right.
Anybody have any questions? We have.
Hi, sorry, I do have a lot, so I won't do all of them because there's a lot. My biggest, I just want to know, probably the biggest one is we use Microsoft, but also OneDrive for all our information. Because it needs to be kind of on the fly. We have consultants around Australia. Is that okay, or do you recommend having like a cloud-based of all that information separate from our email kind of? Because that's what I worry about, is having them in the same system.
So the thing about a lot of cloud systems is ultimately there is one weakness, and that is the credential. So my username and password, or however I log in, is normally the biggest weakness from customers. I can guarantee you somebody's not probably going to hack Microsoft and get in that way. They do, but Microsoft has a very, very big red team. They have a very big purple team. They have a very big blue team. Most compromises I see for things like Microsoft 365 is normally somebody username and password being compromised, and that's how they get in. Now, tools like OneDrive and all that are wonderful, but it comes down to what policies are you using multi-factor authentication to log in? Do you have those processes in place? Because they're the things that guarantee that somebody's just not like walking through the front door. A lot of the time we say, like in the industry now, is hackers don't hack like hacking, they just walking through the front door because they get given credentials from somebody and that lets them in. So in the OneDrive scenario, look, OneDrive is encrypted, the traffic is encrypted between your device and the servers. If you've got multi-factor and you've got those controls, wonderful. My next thing would be, how do you share data from OneDrive? Are you enabling anonymous sharing? Are you controlling how that data can be shared externally with partners, that sort of stuff? Because they're the controls that are going to help you. If somebody was to get into a front door, the first thing they'd probably do is go in there, share that to another person where they could then exfiltrate that data. The other side we sometimes don't talk about, we spend a lot of time talking about hack the decimal, that is the insider risk. What happens if I have a disgruntled employee in these scenarios? How do I guarantee that data hasn't been exfiltrated out of my business, right? And this is kind of where good policies and controls come in place and a good policy, right? But the key of a good policy is it's got to be implemented. And that's where I see a lot of time people have these really great policies that, again, they've downloaded or used AI to write, but the implementation of those policies is key.
I think the issue for all of us is just that we have to accept that it could happen. We've moved to SharePoint and a whole new policies, as Brighton said, and we've had to really consider it through this different lens. Right back to the first thing I said, I had to change my attitude, that I had to start thinking bigger than I was a small business. And that helped, getting the attitude right. And then just like, it's taken me 2 years to get to the point where I'm saying that I'm still addressing this. It's not going away tomorrow. I learnt things this week about my cybersecurity that I didn't understand the week before.
Thank you. Something I've always been curious about is we all know our phones listen to us. All we have to do is go onto Google and social media and all the things we've been talking about pop up. When I meet with my clients, who quite often talk about things that shouldn't be shared with anyone else, we have to have our phones on during the meeting because we need them. And I was wondering, is the information that we're talking about being recorded somewhere that so that it can be accessed or on sold to third parties or?
I think it really depends on what you've got enabled on your device. So to start off with, if Facebook, I know they say it, they don't, we know that they do. You read through the policies, and that's where whatever end user agreements to anything that you sign up to, you really should be reading. I know most of us will go scroll, get to the bottom, okay, fine. Understanding what you are signing your life away to. I think is not one key thing there. I think when it comes to listening on devices, it minimally gets sold to third parties, unless of course you've actually accepted status part terms and conditions. So things, for example, like your Googles and Alexas and all that type of stuff, if you've got one of those sitting, look, there's a possibility that depending on what you've enabled to have access to that data, there is a possibility that may occur. But at the same time, typically no, but it really depends what you're going to install.
I personally probably don't see it as a huge risk because there are very easy controls you can put in place. So like all the I guess phone operating systems now have the ability to go, when this application is running, this is what I want to give permission to. And you can simply just turn on the microphone. And that will guarantee the application has no way to access the operating system's microphone, which would eliminate that risk. So this is sometimes where it can be just toggling a couple of good configurations if you want to eliminate these type of risks.
One of the issues that I've got is, that's great that you and I do that potentially, is our clients, my clients are quite often elderly, less tech savvy, or don't care. Probably most of them don't care. So the issue is, you know, a lot of these issues, understand the risk, but I've got these limitations as to how interested I can get my client base to be interested. What I do is boring enough, let alone giving them a lecture about cybersecurity before we start. It's a hard sell, right? So I'm always worried about, that's, you know, that term I said earlier, inside the moat, outside the moat. So I'm trying to protect my moat. And there's only so much I can do about the entry points. And, you know, it's right, you can do all the right things, but at the end of the day, I've just got to prove that I've done the best I can do. And hopefully the culture changes. And hopefully there's auditoriums full of people listening to, you know, people talk about this because it requires that. And we're just not seeing it yet. So I guess that's the concern.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the extremist view. In managing case officers, spies. We always told them you need to have at least 2 phones, one for personal use and one for professional use. Your professional use should have a minimal number of applications and no social. They should only be for professional use and the apps use encrypted communications and any payment information that's retained on it. And this is basic security. Location services, whether they're on or off, they're managed. You know, we teach tradecraft for the guys because their lives depend on it. Use a cell phone, cheap cell phone from Kohl's or Woolies for tethering if you need to, rather than public Wi-Fi. So, I mean, I own like, well, I won't tell you how many phones I have, but use them for a lot of different things. And they're based on the level of threat or security that I believe exists. But that's the extremist view. That's not something that, you know, everybody's. But it's something that, you know, we would teach our case officers because it was so critical for them to maintain their identities and to defend against any possible compromises. So, yeah.
But it does bring up a good point around the separation of personal and business, right? There should be a consideration of maybe as employers, do we really want all our staff with their personal devices, or do we want to provide a device that we can have control, good policies and configurations to, right?
And from a legal and immigration perspective, if you have everything on one phone, it is subject to search. Everything that is on that phone is subject to search and exploitation for use. So think about that.
One of my concerns is that we MFA so much. I've had to send staff home so that the phone home because it couldn't work without the MFA because we're MFAing so much. One of the active discussions we're having about getting to maturity level 2 is exactly this topic we're talking about. Multiple devices for limiting and petitioning the access, which is back to what Brighton was saying earlier. So it's significant. And there's another, I just said I spent 80 grand last year. I've got to spend maybe that again just to get to that next level. And it's a bit frightening, but it is there. The clients don't understand that I'm bearing these costs. It's a difficult discussion. You somehow got to bear it. And the risk of doing nothing is worse than that. It's bankruptcy or whatever.
Yeah, and I think going on that device part, like we are seeing in the industry now a lot more of these other technologies like hardware tokens for authentication. One of my favorites is passwordless. I hate passwords. I've got too many of them. So the more I can eliminate passwords and use things like just my Touch ID to authenticate. Passkeys, is a lot more frictionless, because the problem with security is we trade up mobility. And small businesses, we're normally very used to being mobile. So being able to pivot and adjust and change things as the economy changes, businesses impact, that sort of stuff. And when you go down a very heavy regulated cyber world, which I'm sure you're feeling right now, is if you had to pivot, there's a lot of work you would have to do to pivot.
Yeah.
Question?
Good morning, Drew Dale. I'm a small business owner and a postgrad student here at UniSC. My question is related to legislation. I'm interested to hear your views on whether the EU AI legislation is likely to be effective and whether or not Australia is likely to implement something similar.
I think that depends where you do business. So if you're doing business with EU customers, then it's definitely going to have an impact on you. Is it something that our government will look at and adopt? I'm not too sure. Like Dennis said, we live in interesting times with some very interesting political atmospheres at the moment. So I think that policy part is going to be very interesting, and we're going to see a lot of fragmentation. I think it's going to ultimately depend on who you do business with, and that is going to drive what policy or compliance you must meet.
I think when it comes to the policies and any legislation that the Australian government in particular is looking at, the Australian government does have a tendency to err on the side of caution of, will this disrupt too many businesses? Because trust me, they know that we have a very, very, very immature business level within the country. I think the EU is sort of lucky enough in that regards that they've had GDPR, they've had some fairly stringent rules in place for quite a while now. And businesses over there have adopted some controls which over here, most businesses will still walk at. So I've got a feeling that within the next 10 years or so, things like that will occur. It won't be immediate and you will get a lot of notification before things like that do, but it is going to start to come sort of into place. So even for example, the privacy laws and the recommendations from that point of view, it's also going to be a massive element of being able to enable people and educate just general individuals as well to go, well, hold on a second, you do rock up to a hotel and they go, hey, can I take your driver's license and take a copy of that? You are allowed to then push back and say, why are you taking my driver's license? Where are you storing these copies? Are you storing it once I leave? No, I don't want to give you this information. So you do have the ability to do that, and the legislation will give you the ability to do that. But it's going to be a very slow process, I think, over here. The government's not going to move too quickly.
Okay, we'll wrap up. Okay, so just wanted to just have some closing remarks. Really interesting panel. Thank you so much to our panelists and our moderator. I feel like we need further information on this and maybe like a short course or something because, you know, it's sort of just like, wet the taste buds, so to speak. So thank you so much. And yeah, my name's Dr. Jane Menzies. If you haven't met me before, I'm the postgraduate programs coordinator here at UniSC. And the part of the interest of having this panel today on cybersecurity was that's what the 4556 Chamber wanted, but also in our MBA program, we're looking to offer a specialisation in cybersecurity as well at a later point in time. So it's very apt, I guess, for business owners to do that. I guess also if you want to learn more, you can go and do the graduate certificate in cybersecurity or even the masters as well, which some people might be interested in. So thank you. And I just wanted to highlight some of our upcoming events with our partners, with IML and the 4556 Chamber. On the 22nd of July, we'll have one on leadership. And then on 14th of October, we'll have one on managing a multi-generational workforce and perhaps some end of year celebrations in November. So again, thank you so much for your attendance today, and thank you to our panelists and moderator. I just have a small gift of appreciation for each, which I will present to you, but maybe we should all give a round of applause. Feel free to stay for a little bit more of networking. There's plenty of food up the back there, or if you have to go as well. But yeah, we have the room till 9 o'clock, so feel free to stay for a little bit. Thank you. Really interesting. Thank you. Yeah. All the things that I need to do.
My son's a graduate of university.
Oh, okay.
And not probably the honours student should have been, but anyway.
They're overrated.
Yeah. So,